Hello, welcome back to Diversion to Voluntary Kinship Care, a discussion guide for the child welfare worker and the kinship caregiver. My name is Leah Dodds, and I am with Foster Kinship, and this is part 2, resources for families, caregivers, children, and birth parents. So when we're talking about diversion, like we defined in part 1, it's really important for us to assess resources for families. So families, all parts of that family, really understand what they're getting into and what this will look like going forward. Far too often, we have heard incorrect resources provided to families. For example, a caregiver who has been diverted to voluntary kinship care, meaning the child is not in foster care, has been told that they could get licensed, which is in fact not true. Which really, if you're told that you could get licensed and a family is expecting a licensing reimbursement, it is going to be very difficult for them to maintain their placement once they realize they will not be getting that. So we're going to go through all types of resources. I do want to preface by saying this is specific to Nevada. And so it's really important, whatever jurisdiction that you are in, to connect with your local kinship navigator program to have them really help you assess what may be your situation and the specific resources for your area. Before we get into it, let's go back through some definitions. So just so you know, voluntary kinship care, that is when a caregiver has been diverted, right? And the children are not in foster care, meaning there is no public child welfare system providing oversight to the family. The family is on their own. Public kinship care, also known as formal kinship care, this is when a child is in foster care. So there is an official placement letter, and the child welfare system has formally placed with the family. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with financial resources that may be available to the child and to the caregiver. So child-only TANF, this is cash assistance through the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. So it's through the state of Nevada. For voluntary kinship care and public kinship care, caregivers may qualify if they meet the welfare requirements. We can help families figure out if they qualify, but yes, there may be cash assistance for the families. However, it is income-based. It is also based on their relationship to the children. So it's just really important to not say yes or no if they qualify without first consulting with welfare, or I really recommend consulting with us to get that support, and then we can also help the family apply. Fictive kin child-only TANF. This is cash assistance for fictive kin caregivers, so a caregiver that does not have a blood relationship to the child, but instead has a strong emotional bond. This is not available for voluntary kinship care. So if you are caring for your child's, your own biological child's best friend, right? Because that child is unable to live with their parents. If you made an informal, there's some kind of informal agreement, or you have temporary guardianship, that child is not in foster care, there is no cash assistance for you. Now, for public kinship care, if that child's in foster care, yes, the caregiver may qualify for cash assistance if all of the welfare requirements are met, but the child must be in foster care. Kinship care payments through the state, through welfare, is possible for voluntary kinship caregivers. There are, again, guidelines that caregivers must meet, including having guardianship, which means that the child is not in foster care. And for kiddos that are in the foster care system, they do not qualify for kinship care payments because there would not be a guardianship in place because the state has custody. For SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, both types of kinship care will qualify as long as the requirements are met. For the child care subsidy, so child care, that's a big one. I was helping a caregiver who had already been caring for her grandchild for quite some time. She got placement, she already had guardianship of this particular grandchild. She got placement of two grandkids and was seriously thinking about becoming a voluntary kinship caregiver, meaning they were going to just give her guardianship and let that be that. And I had to have a very serious conversation with her because she was going to have three littles under 5. One of them was a newborn baby. And so we started talking about her income, her schedule, and it turns out she was really going to need childcare. And her income was approximately $3,000 a month, I believe. And childcare just for that newborn baby is easily going to cost her $1,200 a month, especially with her work schedule that she had. And so that in itself was, in addition to why the child came into care, was the reason why this voluntary kinship care wasn't going to work for her, because she would be coming out almost half of her income just for childcare for one of the kids. So for voluntary kinship caregivers, it's going to be based on your income, and here in Clark County, there is a very long wait list. For public kinship care, yes, there is child care subsidies if a child's in foster care. However, there are certain requirements that need to be met. And again, it is based on the child's status in foster care, not based on the income of the caregiver. And there must be an application completed. For WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, this is a nutrition program, right? Which is great when you have babies that you're caring for that may need formula. For voluntary kinship care, it is based on caregiver income. So again, it goes back to, does the caregiver qualify? Now, if a child's in public kinship care, it is based on the child's status in foster care, not the income, and you must apply. So yes, kids under 5 that are in foster care will qualify for WIC automatically. Medicaid fee-for-service, so straight Medicaid. Voluntary kinship care does not qualify for Medicaid fee-for-service. This is automatic for children in public kinship care. So if a child's in foster care, they qualify automatically. Medicaid HMO, all kids that are in voluntary or informal kinship care will qualify for Medicaid HMO. If a child's in foster care, they will not qualify, again, because they're getting fee-for-service Medicaid. The foster care reimbursement, voluntary kinship caregivers will not qualify for this because the child's not in foster care. So they do not have this option. For public kinship care, the caregiver will qualify if they get licensed. For KinGap, which is subsidized guardianship or an adoption subsidy, voluntary kinship caregivers or kinship families will not qualify for this because it is based on needing to have the public child welfare system involved. However, public kinship care or formal foster care cases, the caregiver will qualify if requirements are met. And we can make another video about those requirements if you guys are interested in a little bit more in depth about specific resources for kinship families. So what legal options does the caregiver have for voluntary kinship care versus public kinship care? Temporary guardianship, this is that notarized document I discussed in part 1 of this series. It is good for 6 months. It must be notarized by both the caregiver and, in some instances, both parents. So for voluntary kinship care, if parents agree, yes, you can get this. However, it can be revoked at any time, meaning a parent can rip it up at any point, say I no longer want this, and it is only good for 6 months. For public kinship care, this is not an option because the state has custody of a child when they're in foster care. For guardianship under NRS 159, which is Nevada Revised Statute, caregivers must apply for this. If the child welfare system requests the guardianship, the caregiver must also serve the child welfare system. Parents can also petition to terminate this at any time. And lately, we've been seeing quite a few terminations occurring, which can be a legal hassle for caregivers, to be quite honest. For public kinship care, guardianship is not an option because the child's in foster care. We consider foster care licensing as a legal option, in addition to a financial option. For voluntary kinship care, again, it is not an option. It is, though, for public kinship care. However, caregivers must apply and meet the requirements of a licensed foster parent. For guardianship under NRS 432B, it's not an option for voluntary kinship caregivers because the public child welfare system, that needs to be the action to close with guardianship. So the child must be with caregiver for 6 months unless waived. For kin gap, this is subsidized guardianship. It is not an option for voluntary kinship care because the child's not in foster care and doesn't meet those requirements. For public or formal kinship care, it is an option if licensed and the public child welfare system requirements are met. Now, adoption can be an option for both types of families. However, for voluntary kinship care, it is a little difficult. You must do the termination of parental rights and the adoption privately, and this can be really expensive or difficult. In some instances, it's nearly impossible to do without a lawyer, which again increases the cost of doing it. In some instances, caregivers are able to do this without a lawyer, but again, it is very difficult to do. For public kinship care, the child welfare system can assist with the process in the event of the termination of parental rights, and the system will also cover the financial costs associated with the adoption. So that can be very nice, and they also provide a lawyer to help with the legal aspects of it. So what supports are available to the child? Medicaid fee-for-service. For voluntary, no. For public, that is a yes. That is automatic for children in foster care. Medicaid HMO, caregivers must apply if they're a voluntary kinship caregiver. All children will qualify, though, and it is not based on caregiver income at this time. For public kinship care, they do not qualify, again, because they get Medicaid fee-for-service. A case manager for the parent or child can be very helpful in supporting the family. For voluntary kinship care, there is no case manager for parent or child. For public kinship care, There's in Clark County a permanency worker that provides support and resources to the family and general oversight to ensure that the child is being kept safe, right? And also that the parents are following their plan. Reunification support provided by the public child welfare system. There is no reunification support for voluntary kinship caregivers, which makes it increasingly difficult for parents to get support in whatever those unmet needs are, whether it's mental health, substance use, as well as support for the child, right? Which is what this section is about. But it really lacks those direct resources for child and overall reunification. There is this support for public kinship care because there is an open case and the agency provides that. An attorney to represent the child's interest. This is either known as a GAP attorney or a CAP attorney. In some NRS 15A guardianship cases for voluntary kinship care, there is an attorney that is assigned to the child to represent them and their wishes. In public kinship care, yes, they will receive a CAP attorney. Early intervention services. So this is support in helping increase a child's development and well-being. Yes, it is available for voluntary kinship care. For public kinship care, it's also available as well. Child Find, this is help with individualized education plans, also known as IEPs. This is available to both types of kinship families. Court-appointed special advocates, also known as CASAs. They are there to provide input as to what is best interest for child as the case goes through the courts. This is not available for voluntary kinship care. However, it can be made available to children in public or formal kinship care if the judge assigns it. What support's available to the kinship caregiver? For voluntary kinship care, there is no option for kinship licensing training, which licensing trainings, yes, they're great to teach about, the different rules related to licensure. However, the training is so much more than that. It helps caregivers identify, grief and loss in children themselves and the parents, as well as different behavior techniques to really help manage some of those difficult behaviors. And there should be more training for kinship families in general, and licensing trainings are not available to voluntary kinship caregivers. Now, for public kinship care, if the caregiver chooses to be licensed or take classes for adoption, then it's available. A case manager for the parent or child. So this is not available. And I think that should say case manager for the kinship caregiver. or a case manager for the parent or child, which can really help the caregiver navigate through the system. This is not available for voluntary kinship care, but it is available for public kinship care. Now, foster kinship can provide support and resources for the family, regardless of type of kinship family. We serve all kinship families. That includes providing information referrals, right, to different resources or community partners. We can provide case management, which is helping them navigate through the system, helping them with different applications. We provide support groups and family events to support the family. And we also provide 4 hours of free respite care, or at least 4 hours of free respite care per month. This can increase based on our availability as well as based on caregivers' need. So we are there to support the family regardless of the type. Now, what support is available to the birth parents? In voluntary kinship care, birth parents do not get a lawyer. If there is an open CPS case, yes, they will get a lawyer. There is no case plan for them in voluntary kinship care. That is not available. For public kinship care, that is available to them, and that will guide them in achieving reunification and helping meet those unmet needs. Referrals to different services, they could possibly get that with voluntary kinship care, but it's going to take a lot of work on their part and finding that partner agency that will help them and support them. Referrals to services is available in public kinship care when they have that open case. Reunification support and timelines. This is not a thing for voluntary kinship care when birth parents are in this sort of arrangement. So there is no support with reunification, nor is there any time frames that could tell them how long it takes to get their kids back. For public kinship care, there are formal federal timelines that need to be followed by agency and the courts. So there is that, level of protection, not just for birth parents, but also the children. And a peer mentor, no, there is no peer mentors for voluntary kinship care arrangements that birth parents may be in. However, for public kinship care, if they request it, they could have a peer mentor, which can be so helpful and important going through and navigating this process, to having somebody who knows what it's like to be in their shoes. There's such a stigma against birth parents when really birth parents just need support and resources, and who better to help walk them through that than somebody who's been in those shoes and had to really gain that support and other things. So when we're thinking about, is diversion a good choice for the family? Kinship diversion should never be used as a path of least resistance when other options are either legally required or will achieve better outcomes for children and families. So it is our belief that every family deserves that assessment, and we include the child, kinship caregiver, and birth parent when they are trying to figure out what is the best option for the family. What is going to be in the best interest for the child, and it is not a one size fits all. So again, for more information, you can check out our website. All of our advocates are trained to assist families who are at the decision point regarding diversion to help understand their options in voluntary kinship care versus public kinship care. Appointments can be made for free for workers and families. And like we said in the first video, we have numerous grant programs that can really help support families that are, kind of at this decision-making point or have already decided that diversion is going to be a good option for them. So please feel free to reach out to us. We cannot wait to talk to you guys more. Thanks so much.